Texas A&M's biggest surprise of fall camp is great for the Aggies.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What is the biggest surprise of fall camp for the Aggies? Well, it's very simple. It is finding out that Jabre Barber is going to be back healthier than we expected. You look at the depth of this wide receiver room, and I talked about for months and months and months how concerned I was. I was concerned about, okay, I like who you've got there in the starting three, but then if you lose a guy or you lose a couple guys to injury, which we've been seeing take the SEC by storm over the last couple weeks, you're in a bad spot. You're in a bad spot because you have a lot of young players. You have a lot of players that don't have a ton of experience. They're great receivers, but we don't know what they got yet. And you'd love to be able to let those players have a year to develop. And Isaiah Williams and Ernest Campbell, some of these guys, I'm talking about the freshmen. You'd love to give them a year to develop before they're really thrown into the fire of college football, unless you need them. And Jabre Barber being back healthy sooner than we expected is so massive for this football team. Jabre Barber is a really good wide receiver, and he was turning heads. He was playing great football in the spring when he was out there practicing, and then he gets hurt, and you go, uh-oh. This was I think Jabre Barber was going to be the first guy, was going to be the sixth man of the year in the receiver room. I think he was going to be that first guy off the bench. And when I say off the bench, I think he was going to play some serious snaps this season. I'm talking a bunch of snaps per game. I'm not just talking about he's your depth. He was going to be a dude in this Texas A&M wide receiver room. And we thought he was done for the year. And if not the year, we thought he'd maybe be back for the last couple of games of the season. And Coach Elko in a press conference a couple days ago, maybe it was actually a couple weeks ago, announces that Jabre Barber is going to be back healthier with a chance at playing week 1. Now, we haven't gotten an update since then, so I'm not sure how much of a believer I am in him being good to go week 1. I think he'll be good to go within the first few games. What I have said makes the most sense. If you're rushing him back, I think what makes the most sense is having him come back for the Florida game. If he's not going to be ready for the Notre Dame game, I'd hold him out against McNeese, and I'd throw him out there against Florida. I think that's a great game to get him started. A game that you could really use him, a road game where, hey, a veteran receiver sure would be nice to have. But you've got to feel a whole heck of a lot better about this room top to bottom now, knowing that you're going to have a healthy Jabre Barber for, at least 3/4 of the season, I'd say. And that's probably the worst case, is 3/4 of the season. So I talked about it. I mean, y'all know, this was a conversation that I was having often, as you everydayers, know here on the show. I was saying, I don't feel great about the depth in this room. And finding out that Jabre Barber was going to be back immediately, boom, made me feel better. The second I found out, I felt better about it. And honestly, top to bottom, I'm starting to feel better about this wide receiver room. And I'll tell you, at no point was I ever concerned about Noah Thomas, Jade Walker, and Moose Muhammad. Those guys weren't the concern. The concern was where's the depth? Now you got Jabre Barber back. You still got Cyrus Allen, who I've heard is doing some really good things so far this spring. And he's going to be a guy that, like Jabre Barber, I think is going to get some serious snaps this year. So those two guys, plus Noah Thomas, Janae Walker, and Moose Muhammad. Now you got 5 receivers that I feel really, really, really good about. Then you add in a Micah Tease, and you add in some of these freshmen. You add in a Bostic, who I've heard is playing well so far. A guy that at Iowa, once again, he was a receiver at Iowa. That doesn't tend to work out well for receivers. So, he's a player that I think the upside is definitely there. The upside's there. And I quickly, adding Bostic, getting Jabre Barber healthy earlier than we expected, hearing how some of these freshmen are playing so far in camp, I already feel a lot better about this room. And it's a room, I think Texas A&M is going to have an elite quarterback. I've stated that on this show many, many times. As you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies know, that I am a huge Connor Wigman guy, and I think that he's going to have a huge season. So the question then becomes, okay, if you're going to have an elite quarterback, you got to have some elite weapons around him. And my confidence in Texas A&M having that is much higher now. So that was my number one positive surprise of spring camp so far. My number 2 would probably be the offensive line. And I want you to hear me out on this. I'm still not extremely confident in this offensive line. I'm not. But just the vibes, hearing about how players like Armaj Reed-Adams, players like Chase Basantis, Mark Naboo, the transfer from Utah College. I mean, hearing about how some of these guys are playing right now makes me feel a lot top to bottom better about this room. And once again, I've talked about how I think Coach Cushing, who came with Elko from Duke, he's a really good offensive line coach. I mean, under Adazio last year, they just weren't great. It was just, he was not developing. You had the talent and it wasn't being developed. I don't think that's going to be an issue anymore with Coach Cushing over here at the, coaching the offensive line for Texas A&M. I think he's a really, really good coach with a really high upside. A coach that's going to help this offensive line get to that next level. You've had the talent. You've always had the talent. It's could you get that talent and have it come together as a unit and make a really good offensive line. And I think this is going to be the year where they're better. I think it's going to take Coach Cushing a little bit more time in the system. I think it's going to take him a little bit more time in College Station as the head coach of Texas A&M. I mean, of the offensive line coach of Texas A&M for this unit to really dial in. But I think this unit is going to be okay this year. And I'm still concerned. I'm not saying I'm not concerned about it. I am definitely concerned about it. But I gain a little bit of confidence every day. Everything I hear, everything I read, I'm gaining just a little bit. I mean, 0.5% of confidence every day. And I've talked about this a ton here on the show. If Texas A&M's offensive line can just be serviceable, I'm not asking for this to be the best unit in the world. I'm not asking for Texas A&M's offensive line to be the number 1 offensive line in the SEC. Would that be awesome? Of course that'd be awesome. It would be incredible. But at the end of the day, I think that what Texas A&M needs is a unit that is just good enough to give Connor Wigman time to get the ball out and the receivers to get open and to create space for the running backs. So I think those are my 2 surprises of spring so far, with the most exciting, most important ones being, hey, Jabre Barber is going to be out there on the field, which we were not expecting for a very long period of time. So those are my biggest surprises of spring so far. But I definitely think Texas A&M football is moving in the right direction over these last few weeks, aside from the Reuben Owens injury. That was the one real killer there. But besides that, I think this program is really moving into a good spot heading into the start of the season. I want to talk about what Texas A&M's offense is going to look like this year. Is Collin Klein going to throw it more than he did last year at Kansas State? Is it going to be balanced? Is it going to be run heavy, pass heavy? We're going to talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, and of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. So I want to talk a little bit about what this offense might look like under Coach Collin Klein this year. So last year at Kansas State, I want to pull up, kind of some of these numbers. And we've run through the numbers, but I'm talking about, I want to run through more. What's the balance going to look like? So last year, you had a total of 426 passing attempts at Kansas State. That's compared to Texas A&M, who had a total of 400, and there's no chance. 426 passing attempts for Texas A&M. Is that exactly what I just said for Kansas State? That's absurd. That's absurd. That's crazy. That is pretty crazy. So the same amount of passing attempts. But, last year you saw Kansas State run the ball about 100 times more than they passed it with 533 total carries. So the question then becomes, what is this Texas A&M offense going to look like with Coach Klein as the guy? Is it going to be more run heavy, more pass heavy? Last year they loved to run the football, like I said, at Kansas State. And I don't think that's going to change. I think you're going to see Texas A&M run the football a lot, but I could see Coach Klein having Connor Wigman throw the ball more than he has in it, or more than he could throw the ball at Texas A&M more than he has in his career before. I think his weapons receiver-wise, obviously at Kansas State last year, Sanat, the tight end, was a great player. Who's he with now? I keep forgetting. The Commanders. And he actually had a pretty good game in his preseason game. But, he's a player that got a lot of targets, got a lot of receptions, and got a lot of touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. And I think so he was a solid weapon is what I'm getting at here. But I also think that Coach Klein's weapons, the receivers he has now at Texas A&M, are much better than the receivers he had at Kansas State. So I think that he's going to throw the football a little bit more. Not a ton more. I think this is going to be a balanced offense. You want to have balance in an offense because what does that do? If you can throw it, it opens up running lanes. If you can run it, it opens up the ability to throw the football. It opens up play action. That is why it's so important to be able to throw it and run it. You got to be able to do both. And this Texas A&M offense is going to be balanced. They're going to be able to do it all. And that's going to make this offense balanced. But I think you're going to see Coach Klein throw the football a lot this year. Connor Wigman's primed for a huge season. I just got done talking about how good we feel about this wide receiver room, especially now with depth you add, bringing Barber back and having Cyrus Allen playing well, stuff like that. So the question then becomes, what's this, offense going to look like? And I think it's going to be balanced, but I still, once again, you had 100 more carries last year at Kansas State than you did passing attempts. I think you could see that margin close a little bit. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, that gives you, when the ball's in the air, your chances of scoring a touchdown increase some, especially when you're pushing it way downfield. And I think you're going to see Coach Klein push the ball downfield some this year. I think he's going to let Connor Wigman air it out a little bit. So I'm I mean, I just wake up giddy, seriously, every day, excited to see how good this Texas A&M offense is going to be. I think it's going to be so much better than last year's offense. Now, you have to remember, to be fair to this offense last year, you had Connor Wigman, then you had Max Johnson, then you had Jalen Henderson, then you had Marcel Reed. It was a swinging door of quarterbacks. I mean, this offense could not catch a break when it came to keeping a quarterback healthy. The goal is to keep your quarterback healthy this year, and I think if that happens, you're going to feel a lot. You're going to see a lot of improvement. You're going to see this be an all-around better offense. It's just hard changing the game plan and doing all this different stuff on a day-to-day basis or game-to-game basis when you have a ton of swinging door of quarterbacks. So if you keep Connor Wigman healthy, that's going to help Coach Klein be consistent in his play calling and have balance and have things open other things up on offense. So that's why I'm so excited to see this offense, because I think it's really going to be a thing of beauty this season. The other thing I want to talk about real quick before we move on to segment 3. So there have been talks from the Notre Dame camp of potentially a true freshman starting at left tackle. I guess they had a freshman working in with the ones recently. And this brings me up. What this tells me, and I'm not saying that this freshman isn't a good player. Of course, Notre Dame lost their left tackle for the season. Really tough for them. It's a tough position to lose, especially on an offensive line that was already a question mark. Then you lose your starting left tackle. Now you're not in a great spot. But looking at this, I think that even if they don't end up starting that freshman at left tackle, to me, it says they're not. If you're throwing a freshman out there, and it's not to say that freshman can't be great. He's not a great player. I'm not saying that at all. One thing that I say all the time here on Locked On Aggies is that freshmen really have a tough time playing on the offensive line. It's one of the toughest positions for a freshman to come in there and play. That's just the reality. It is not easy for a freshman to come in and play offensive line. So if they do end up you have to think about this way. Let's say this freshman does end up being the left tackle, the most important position, behind quarterback, probably on the field. Think about this. You send a true freshman into Kyle Field to play his first football game of college in that atmosphere, protecting your quarterback's blind side. Oh, man. That has 3 false starts written all over it. But the point here is this. I think that if you are this Texas A&M defensive line, you are getting after that player. But let's say they don't end up starting this freshman. Let's say they end up going with somebody else on the roster. To me, it says, A, they're not really sure what they're going to do, and B, there's a little bit of lack of confidence there in who they're going to start at offensive tackle. So it's a position where hopefully Texas A&M is going to be able to take advantage of the important position on the field that is going to be filled with a player that maybe they don't feel so great about. And that's going to help you get to Riley Leonard's blind side and hopefully, get some sacks, some big third down sacks and stuff like that. So that is definitely over the next 2 weeks, which is so crazy, ladies and gentlemen. We really are. We're there. We're there. We're starting next week, because I'll probably break down the Notre Dame game for 2 weeks. So we'll probably be talking Notre Dame next week. So think how exciting that is. This is, I would say, you might have 1 or 2 kind of off-season conversations next week, and then it's all Notre Dame, which is very, very exciting. But that is something to pay attention to in this football game. I've got some mailbag questions. We're going to talk a little bit about the new uniform. We're going to talk a little bit about a surprise all-SEC player. We'll talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But I got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Listen, I keep saying it. I'm going to a concert a week from today with some of my buddies. Where did I buy my tickets to said concert? It's very simple. I bought them on Game Time. It is the best place to buy tickets. It is the only place anyone should ever buy tickets to any sporting event, any concert, anything. If you need a ticket to it and you can buy it on a ticket service, do it on Game Time. It's the best place. The app's easy to use. They have the best prices. I absolutely love using the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, I want to talk about the new uniform. I'm a fan. I've seen some people, the new black uniform, I've seen some people not be huge fans. And once again, everybody has an opinion. Everybody can feel the way they want to feel. But I think it's a solid uniform. I think it's an all-around good-looking uniform. I feel pretty good about it. And I kind of like how the numbers look with, like, you got the little like indents, whatever you want to call them. I like that. So you can go buy them now. Actually, I mean, I might have to buy one. I might have to buy a Conor Riggin one of those. I'm not gonna lie to you, but it's an all around solid uniform, I think, in my opinion. My next question, and then we're gonna end the show. Someone asked me for my 2 bold fantasy football takes. So I'll give you those here in a minute because it's solid advice. But the question I have here is, who's going to be the surprise all SEC player for Texas A&M? To me, I think it's going to be Des Ricks. I think that Des Ricks is a player. We all know the upside's there. We all know who he can be if he hits his upside. I am a huge Des Ricks believer. I really am. So I think that if he hits his upside, I mean, we know what he was talent-wise coming out of high school. We know that he's been taking some reps with the ones. I think he's the guy that could end up in the starting lineup, and I think he could be really, really good. His upside is absolutely through the roof. So if I had to pick one surprise all-SEC player for the Aggies this year, I think it would be the corner Des Ricks. And then before we call it a day, I'm going to give you my 2 fantasy football nuggets for the year. All you everydayers here at Locked On Aggies that have been OGs, that have been here for a while, know that I am a huge fantasy football guy. Some would say a massive fantasy football guy. My 2 things this year. My first thing is Cooper Kupp finishes with a better season than Puka Nacua. I love Puka Nacua. He's like the most likable guy in the NFL. But I think that at the draft value, I'll take Cooper Kupp all day long. That is my first. My second is, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to have, in the season that he had last year, I think he's going to improve on it this year. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy football. That's not a crazy take, but I've seen some people with the number 2 overall pick going, do I take CeeDee? Do I take Tyreek Hill? I would take CeeDee. That's my other one. I think it's bold. I think a lot of people like Tyreek, but I have the number 2 pick in one of my drafts. And who am I taking? As long as he has a contract, I'm taking CeeDee. Those are my bold fantasy football takes. Let me know yours in the comments. I want to hear some fantasy football takes. I've got drafts coming up next weekend, so let me know some fantasy football takes. That is going to do it for this week here at Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for being here every single day. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It helps the show a ton. Leave a 5-star review on podcast platforms, helps as well. Appreciate y'all so much. Hope everyone has an outstanding weekend, and we will see y'all on Monday right here at Locked On Aggies.